The scent of burning bread hung in the air like a warning when Georgia Bartlett realized her father had locked the bakery door from the outside and pocketed the key. She was 22 years old and trapped like an animal in a cage made of flour dust and her father's rage. Through the front window, she watched the sun climb higher over Virginia City, Nevada, casting harsh shadows across the dusty street where miners and cowboys passed without a glance toward the bakery, where Thomas Bartlett ruled with iron fists, and a temperament that had driven her mother into an early grave 3 years prior. Georgia pressed her palm against the glass, her fingers trembling as she calculated how many hours until her father would return from wherever he had gone. The bruise on her cheekbone from yesterday's argument still throbbed with each heartbeat. She had dared to speak to a customer too kindly, a young man who had complimented her cinnamon rolls. Her father had waited until the shop closed, then reminded her with the back of his hand that she belonged to him, that no man would ever take her away, that she was his property to do with as he pleased until he decided otherwise. The bell above the door jangled, and Georgia spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. But her father had locked it from the outside. How could anyone enter? Then she saw him, tall and broad-shouldered, closing the door behind him with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his size. He wore dust-covered boots, worn denim pants, and a shirt that had seen better days. His hat sat low on his head, casting shadows across a face that was all sharp angles and sun-weathered skin. Dark hair curled slightly at his collar, and when he lifted his gaze to meet hers, she found herself staring into eyes the color of aged whiskey. "Back door was open," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. "Saw smoke coming from your chimney but no one tending the counter. Thought maybe something was wrong." George's mouth went dry. She glanced toward the ovens where she had been mechanically pulling out loaves all morning, her mind elsewhere. "I'm fine. The bakery isn't open yet." The cowboy studied her for a long moment, his gaze traveling over her face with an intensity that made her want to hide. She knew what he was seeing. The bruise, the redness around her eyes from crying, the way she held herself, as if expecting a blow at any moment. "Name's Marcus Hammond," he said, removing his hat and holding it in both hands. "Been passing through Virginia City for a few years now, working different ranches. Never stopped in here before, but I've heard tell your bread's the best in the territory." "It is," Georgia said, lifting her chin with a pride she didn't quite feel. "My mother taught me everything she knew before she passed." Marcus nodded slowly, his expression softening. "I'm sorry for your loss. Losing a parent is never easy." Something in his tone suggested he spoke from experience. Georgia found herself relaxing slightly, though she remained near the back of the shop, maintaining distance between them. "What can I get for you, Mr. Hammond? Just Marcus, please." He approached the counter, his movements careful and deliberate as if he sensed her skittishness. "I'll take whatever you recommend, and maybe you could tell me what happened to your face." The directness of the question startled her. Most people in Virginia City knew about Thomas Bartlett's temper. They saw the bruises that appeared on his daughter's arms and face with disturbing regularity. But no one ever said anything. It wasn't their business, they reasoned. A man had a right to discipline his household as he saw fit. "I fell," Georgia said, the lie tasting bitter on her tongue, "against someone's fist, I'd wager." Marcus set his hat on the counter, his jaw tightening. "Your father," Georgia's silence was answer enough. She turned away, busying herself with wrapping a loaf of sourdough in brown paper. Her hands shook so badly she could barely tie the string. "How long has this been going on?" Marcus asked quietly. "All my life." The words escaped before Georgia could stop them. She closed her eyes, horrified at her own admission. "But it got worse after my mother died. He blames me, I think. Says I should have been able to save her." Says I'm useless and ungrateful, and that no man will ever want damaged goods like me. The silence that followed felt heavy with unspoken thoughts. Georgia risked a glance over her shoulder and found Marcus staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. Anger, certainly, but also something gentler, something that looked almost like understanding. "You need to leave," he said. Georgia laughed, a harsh sound that held no humor. "And go where? I have no money of my own. My father controls everything. The bakery, the house, every penny we make. Even if I could run, he would find me. He'd drag me back and make me pay for the humiliation." Marcus was quiet for a moment, his fingers drumming against the counter in a rhythm that spoke of deep thought. Then he said something that changed everything. "Marry me." Georgia spun around so fast she knocked over a basket of rolls. They tumbled across the floor, forgotten, as she gaped at the cowboy who stood before her with absolute certainty in his eyes. "What?" she whispered. "Marry me," Marcus repeated, his voice steady. "Today, if possible. Once you're my wife, you'll be under my protection. Your father won't have any legal claim on you anymore. You'll be free." "You don't even know me," Georgia protested, her mind reeling. "This is insane. People don't just marry strangers." "They do out here," Marcus said. "Mail-order brides, hasty marriages before heading west, arrangements made for convenience or survival. This wouldn't be the strangest union Virginia City has seen." He paused, then added softly, "And I know enough. I know you're trapped. I know you're suffering. I know you deserve better than a father who treats you like property. That's enough for me." Georgia's legs felt weak. She sank onto a stool behind the counter, her mind racing through possibilities and consequences. "Why would you do this? What do you get out of it?" Marcus picked up his hat, turning it slowly in his hands. "Truth be told, I'm tired of being alone. I've been drifting from ranch to ranch for the past 5 years, ever since my parents died of cholera back in Missouri. Got no family left, no real home to speak of. Maybe I'm being selfish, but the thought of having someone to come home to, someone to build a life with, appeals to me more than I can say." "But you want a real wife," Georgia said, understanding dawning. "Not just a marriage on paper." "Eventually, maybe." Marcus met her gaze squarely. "But I'm not some brute who'd force unwanted attention on a woman. We'd take things slow. Get to know each other. See if something real could grow between us. And if it doesn't, well, at least you'd be safe. You'd have a name that protects you and a husband who respects your wishes." The bell above the front door jangled violently. Georgia's blood turned to ice as she heard her father's voice bellowing from outside. "Georgia, Georgia, open this door right now." "I locked it behind me," Marcus said calmly, though Georgia saw his shoulders tense. "Back door too, once I came through. Figured you might need some privacy." Thomas Bartlett's face appeared in the window, red and contorted with fury. "What's going on in there? Who's that man? Georgia, you open this door right now or so help me." Georgia stood on shaking legs, her decision crystallizing in that moment of terror. She looked at Marcus Hammond, this stranger who had walked into her prison and offered her a key to freedom and made the easiest and hardest choice of her life. "Yes," she whispered. "I'll marry you." Marcus's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes that might have been relief. "Get whatever you need. Anything important to you. We're leaving right now." "I have nothing," Georgia said, and realized it was true. Everything in the bakery, everything in the house above, belonged to her father. Her mother's wedding ring had been sold years ago. Her clothes were threadbare and patched. She owned nothing but the bruises on her skin and the scars in her heart. "Then we leave as we are." Marcus moved toward the back door, then paused. "Unless there's something you want to say to him first." Georgia looked at her father's face in the window, at the man who had terrorized her for 22 years, who had beaten her mother until her spirit broke and her body followed, who had stolen any chance at joy or normalcy from her life. She thought about all the things she could say, all the accusations she could hurl, all the pain she could throw back in his face. Instead, she turned her back on him and walked toward Marcus Hammond and the future he offered. They slipped out the back door while Thomas Bartlett's shouts echoed through the street. Marcus led her through a maze of alleys and side streets, his hand firm but gentle on her elbow, guiding her away from the only life she had ever known. Virginia City sprawled around them in all its rough glory, a boom town built on silver and dreams. The Comstock Lode had brought thousands of people here to Nevada territory, transforming what had been empty desert into a bustling city perched on the side of Mount Davidson. "Where are we going?" Georgia asked as they emerged onto a street she didn't recognize. "Pastor Reynolds," Marcus said. "He's a good man, doesn't ask too many questions. Married a friend of mine last year under similar circumstances. He'll do right by us." Pastor Reynolds turned out to be a kindly man in his 60s with silver hair and gentle eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. He lived in a small house behind the Methodist church, and he listened to their story with the practiced patience of someone who had heard many desperate tales in his years of ministry. "This is what you want?" he asked Georgia directly. "No one's forcing you." "I'm choosing this," Georgia said firmly. "I'm choosing freedom." Pastor Reynolds nodded. "Then let's make it legal and binding. You'll need witnesses, though. Can't perform a marriage without proper witnesses." "I'll fetch the Hendersons," his wife said from the doorway where she had been listening. Martha Reynolds was a plump woman with kind eyes and flour on her apron. "They live next door and owe us a favor." Within 15 minutes, Georgia found herself standing in the Reverend's parlor with Marcus Hammond at her side and two bemused neighbors bearing witness as vows were exchanged. The words felt surreal, like she was watching someone else's life unfold. But when Marcus took her hand in his, the warmth of his calloused palm against hers anchored her to reality. "I, Marcus James Hammond, take you, Georgia Rose Bartlett, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I, Georgia Rose Bartlett, take you, Marcus James Hammond, to be my lawfully wedded husband." No rings exchanged, no fancy dress or celebration, just two people making promises in a dusty parlor while the Nevada sun beat down outside. But when Pastor Reynolds pronounced them husband and wife, Georgia felt something shift inside her chest. A loosening of chains she had worn so long she had forgotten they were there. "You'll need the marriage certificate," Martha Reynolds said practically. "Thomas Bartlett will contest this. Mark my words. He'll claim coercion or impropriety. You'll need proof that everything was done proper and legal." "She's right," Marcus said. "We should leave Virginia City today. Head somewhere your father can't find us easily." "I have a ranch," Georgia said suddenly, remembering. "Or I should have. My mother's father left her a piece of land out near Carson City when he died. My father said he sold it, but I found papers hidden in my mother's things after she passed. The deed is still in her name, never transferred. As her only heir, it should pass to me." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Your father doesn't know you have these papers." "He doesn't even know I know about the ranch. Mama told me about it once when I was young, made me promise to remember. Said it was insurance in case things got too bad. She meant to take me there to run away, but she never got the chance." Georgia's throat tightened with old grief. "I think she stopped believing escape was possible." "But you believed," Marcus said softly. "You kept her secret all these years. The papers are hidden in the bakery, in a tin behind the loose brick near the oven. We'd have to go back. Then that's what we'll do." Marcus turned to Pastor Reynolds. "Can you give us an hour? If Thomas Bartlett comes asking, you haven't seen us." The pastor's expression was grave. "I won't lie, son, but I also won't volunteer information. You do what you need to do to keep your wife safe. Your wife." The words sent a shiver through Georgia. She was someone's wife now. She belonged to Marcus Hammond in the eyes of the law and God. But somehow, standing next to this quiet cowboy with his steady gaze and gentle hands, she didn't feel owned. She felt protected. It was a distinction that made all the difference. They waited until dusk to return to the bakery. The streets of Virginia City grew raucous as night fell, miners and cowboys spilling out of saloons and gambling halls, their laughter and shouts providing cover. Marcus kept Georgia close as they moved through the shadows, his hand resting on the gun at his hip in a way that suggested he knew how to use it. The bakery was dark and silent. The front door hung open, broken hinges testimony to Thomas Bartlett's rage. Inside, the shop had been destroyed. Loaves of bread lay smashed on the floor, mixing bowls shattered against the walls, flour scattered like snow across every surface. Georgia's heart clenched at the sight of her mother's workspace violated so thoroughly. "Quickly," Marcus murmured. "Get what you came for." Georgia picked her way through the destruction to the brick oven that had been the heart of the bakery for as long as she could remember. Her fingers found the loose brick exactly where it had always been. She pulled it free and reached into the hollow space behind, her hand closing around the tin that contained her mother's secret legacy. "Got it," she whispered. A board creaked overhead. Someone was in the living quarters above the shop. Georgia froze, her eyes meeting Marcus's in the dim light. He put a finger to his lips and drew his gun, a smooth, practiced motion that spoke of experience. They moved toward the back door with agonizing slowness, each step carefully placed to avoid the debris scattered across the floor. "Georgia." Her father's voice drifted down the stairs, slurred with drink. "Georgia, is that you? Come here, girl. We need to talk about your behavior today." They slipped out the back door and into the alley beyond. Marcus didn't holster his gun until they were 3 blocks away, and even then, he kept glancing over his shoulder until they reached the livery stable where he had apparently left his horse that morning. "One horse?" Georgia asked. "We'll share until we can get another," Marcus said. "You ever ridden before?" No. Georgia had never been allowed to leave Virginia City, had barely left the bakery except for carefully supervised trips to buy supplies. "It's easy enough. You'll ride in front of me." Marcus led a handsome chestnut gelding from its stall and began saddling it with efficient movements. "This is Copper. He's steady and reliable. He'll get us where we need to go." Within minutes, Georgia found herself lifted onto the horse's back as if she weighed nothing. Marcus swung up behind her, his arms coming around her to grasp the reins. She stiffened at the proximity, at the feeling of being surrounded by him, but his voice in her ear was reassuring. "I've got you. Just relax and move with the horse. We have a long ride ahead of us." They left Virginia City as the moon rose over Mount Davidson, casting silver light across the desert landscape. Georgia had never been beyond the town limits, and the vast openness of Nevada territory spread before her like a promise. The air smelled different out here, cleaner somehow, without the smoke and dust and desperation of the mining town. "Tell me about this ranch," Marcus said, as Copper settled into an easy lope. Georgia opened the tin and pulled out the papers by moonlight. "It's called Willow Creek Ranch. 200 acres with water rights, about 15 miles outside Carson City. The deed says there's a house and a barn, though I don't know what condition they're in. Mama's father was a cattleman, ran a small operation there until he died in 1872. That was 10 years ago. The property could be completely run down by now. Or it could be our new home," Marcus said. "Either way, it's land. That's more than most people have. We can build something there, make it into whatever we want it to be. We." The pronouns felt foreign but not unwelcome. Georgia had spent so long thinking in terms of I and me, alone against the world, that the idea of partnership was almost overwhelming. They rode through the night, stopping only briefly to rest the horse and stretch their legs. Marcus shared jerky and hardtack from his saddlebags, apologizing for the meager fare. Georgia ate it gratefully, realizing she hadn't had a proper meal since yesterday. Her father had forgotten to feed her again, too caught up in his own grievances to remember that his daughter needed sustenance. "Tell me about yourself," Georgia said as they prepared to mount up again. "I know your name and that you lost your parents, but little else. If we're going to be married, I should probably know more." Marcus leaned against Copper's flank, his face thoughtful in the starlight. "Not much to tell, really. I'm 27 years old, born and raised in Missouri. My father was a farmer, and I was the youngest of 4 boys. When the cholera came through in '77, it took my parents and 2 of my brothers within a week. My oldest brother, Samuel, sold the farm and moved east to live with our mother's sister. I couldn't stand the thought of city life, so I headed west instead." "Do you miss him? Your brother?" "Sometimes. We write occasionally. He's got a wife and children now, a respectable job in a bank. A good life, but not one that would suit me." Marcus helped Georgia back onto Copper, his hand steadying her. "I like the open spaces out here, like knowing that a man can make something of himself through hard work and determination. The frontier doesn't care much about where you came from, only about where you're going." They reached the outskirts of Carson City as dawn painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. The territorial capital was smaller than Virginia City, but more established, with proper streets and government buildings. Marcus guided Copper to a hotel near the center of town and helped Georgia down from the saddle. "We'll get a room and some proper rest," he said. "Then we'll find the land office and sort out the deed to your ranch. After that, we'll need supplies before we head out to Willow Creek." The hotel clerk's eyes flickered between them, taking in Georgia's disheveled appearance and lack of luggage, the way Marcus kept a protective hand on her back. But the marriage certificate produced the desired effect, and soon they were climbing stairs to a modest room with a single bed. Georgia stopped in the doorway, suddenly aware of the implications. Marcus seemed to read her thoughts. "I'll take the floor," he said quietly. "You take the bed. You're exhausted, and I've slept in worse places than a hotel floor." "Marcus, you don't have to. I meant what I said earlier. We take things slow. I'm not going to rush you into anything you're not ready for." He set his saddlebags in the corner and began pulling out a bedroll. "Get some rest, Georgia. You're safe here." Those words, simple as they were, nearly undid her. Georgia climbed onto the bed fully clothed and pulled the clean sheets around her like armor. She watched Marcus settle onto the floor with his bedroll, watched him remove his boots and hat and gun belt with practiced efficiency. Within minutes, his breathing evened out into the rhythm of sleep. But Georgia lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling and trying to process everything that had happened in the span of a single day. This morning, she had been a prisoner in her father's bakery. Now, she was a married woman with a cowboy husband and the deed to a ranch she had never seen. It felt like a dream, fragile and impermanent, something that might shatter with the rising sun. She must have slept eventually because the next thing she knew, light was streaming through the window and Marcus was gently shaking her shoulder. "Sorry to wake you, but it's almost noon. We should get moving if we want to handle everything today." Georgia sat up, disoriented and stiff. Her face throbbed where her father had struck her, and her body ached from hours on horseback. But beneath the physical discomfort was something new, something that took her a moment to identify. Hope. They ate breakfast in the hotel dining room, a simple meal of eggs and bacon and fresh bread that Georgia savored bite by bite. Marcus watched her with those whiskey-colored eyes, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "What?" Georgia asked, suddenly self-conscious. "You enjoy food," he said. "Really enjoy it, I like that." "I grew up in a bakery. Food has always been important to me." Georgia paused. "My mother used to say that bread was love made visible, that every loaf we baked carried our care and attention into the world." My father thought that was nonsense, but I always believed it. Your mother sounds like she was a wise woman. She was, and sad. I wish I could have saved her. The old guilt rose up, familiar and heavy. Marcus reached across the table and covered her hand with his. From what you've told me, your mother's death wasn't something you could have prevented. Sometimes people just wear out, especially when they've been hurt for too long. That's not your fault, Georgia. That's on the person who did the hurting. The land office was a stuffy building filled with maps and filing cabinets. The clerk, a nervous man with ink-stained fingers, examined the deed carefully while Georgia held her breath. Finally, he looked up. This is legitimate. Property has been sitting abandoned since William Bartlett's death in 1872. There are back taxes owed, though, quite a sum, actually, 10 years' worth. Georgia's heart sank. How much? The clerk did some calculations. $300. It might as well have been $3,000. Georgia had no money at all. She looked at Marcus, expecting to see disappointment or frustration. Instead, he simply nodded. I can cover it, he said. Marcus, no, that's too much. I can't ask you to. You didn't ask. I'm offering. He pulled a worn leather wallet from his pocket and began counting bills. I've been saving for 5 years, working every ranch job I could find, putting aside every penny. I was saving for land of my own someday. Well, now I have it. We have it. But this was your dream, Georgia protested. Your money. Marcus handed the cash to the clerk and turned to Georgia with absolute certainty in his expression. My dream was a place to call home. You're giving me that. This is our land now, Georgia, ours together. That makes it worth every penny. The deed was transferred, papers were signed and stamped, and suddenly Georgia owned something. For the first time in her life, she possessed something that no one could take away. Marcus James Hammond was listed as her husband on the documents, their names linked in official black ink. They spent the afternoon buying supplies. Marcus seemed to know exactly what they would need for ranch life tools, seeds, basic foodstuffs, blankets, cooking equipment. Georgia added flour and sugar and yeast, already planning the bread she would bake in whatever kitchen awaited them at Willow Creek. You're really going to start baking again? Marcus asked as they loaded supplies onto a wagon he had purchased along with a sturdy mare to pull it. It's what I know, Georgia said. What I'm good at. And besides, bread is bread. It doesn't care about the circumstances of its creation. It just needs the right ingredients and attention and time to rise. Marcus studied her for a moment, then said softly, You're going to rise too, Georgia. Away from your father with time and care. You're going to become exactly who you were meant to be. The ride to Willow Creek took them southeast from Carson City, into rolling hills dotted with sagebrush and juniper trees. The landscape was harsh but beautiful, all muted colors and endless sky. Marcus drove the wagon while Georgia sat beside him, Copper tied behind and trotting along contentedly. There, Marcus said, pointing to a break in the hills where cottonwood trees clustered green and lush against the browns and grays of the desert. Willow Creek Ranch materialized before them like something out of a dream. The house was small but sturdy, built of rough-hewn logs with a stone chimney rising from one end. The barn was larger, weathered but still standing, with a corral that needed mending. And running through it all was the creek itself, a ribbon of precious water that explained how anything could grow in this arid land. Georgia climbed down from the wagon on shaking legs. The house was overgrown with weeds, windows dark with dust and spider webs. But it was whole. It was real. It was hers. What do you think? Marcus asked, coming to stand beside her. I think my mother would be happy, Georgia said, tears streaming down her face. I think she would be so happy that I made it here, that I got out. Marcus pulled her into his arms without asking permission, and Georgia let herself be held. She pressed her face against his chest and sobbed out years of pain and fear and grief. He stood solid as a mountain, one hand rubbing slow circles on her back while she fell apart and put herself back together again. When the tears finally subsided, Georgia pulled back and wiped her face. "I'm sorry. I don't apologize. You've earned every one of those tears." Marcus brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch gentle. "Come on. Let's see what we're working with inside." The house was a disaster of dust and animal nests and years of neglect, but the structure was sound. One large room served as kitchen and living area, with a bedroom off to one side and a small loft accessible by ladder. The furniture was basic but serviceable once they cleaned it. The cookstove needed work but could be repaired. They spent the rest of the day cleaning, hauling out debris and washing windows and sweeping floors until Georgia's arms ached and her back screamed in protest. But it was good pain, productive pain. The pain of building something instead of enduring something. As the sun set, Marcus built a fire in the cookstove and Georgia unpacked food supplies. They ate a simple meal of beans and bacon and bread purchased in Carson City, sitting on the porch steps and watching the last light fade from the sky. "Tomorrow we'll need to assess the barn and corral," Marcus said. "Figure out what livestock we can support. A few cattle, definitely. Maybe some chickens. A milk cow if we can manage it. We'll need a garden," Georgia added. "Vegetables to see us through winter. And I want to plant herbs, rosemary and thyme and sage, things that will make the bread special." Marcus smiled at her enthusiasm. "Sounds like a plan. We'll build this ranch together one day at a time." That night, they made up beds on opposite sides of the main room, Georgia taking the bedroom while Marcus insisted on sleeping by the fire. Before they separated, Marcus caught her hand. "I know this is all happening fast," he said. "I know we're practically strangers. But I want you to know that I'm glad you're here, Georgia. Glad you trusted me enough to take this chance." "I'm glad too," Georgia said honestly. "For the first time in my life, I feel like I can breathe." The days that followed fell into a rhythm of hard work and small discoveries. Marcus proved to be skilled with his hands, capable of fixing anything from broken fence posts to leaking roofs. He worked from sunrise to sunset, often past the point of exhaustion, driven by a determination to make Willow Creek Ranch prosper. Georgia threw herself into creating a home. She scrubbed every surface until it shone, sewed curtains from fabric purchased in Carson City, planted a garden in the rich soil near the creek, and she baked. Every day, without fail, she mixed dough and kneaded and shaped and baked until the house smelled constantly of fresh bread. "You're going to make us fat," Marcus said one evening, biting into a roll still warm from the oven. His eyes closed in pleasure. "This is incredible, Georgia. Better than anything I've ever tasted." "It's my mother's recipe," Georgia said, watching him eat with a satisfaction that went bone deep. "I told you, bread is love made visible." As the weeks passed, they learned each other's rhythms and habits. Marcus was quiet in the mornings, needing coffee before conversation. Georgia sang while she worked, old hymns her mother had taught her. Marcus was neat to the point of fastidiousness, everything in its place. Georgia was more scattered, leaving bits of flour and dough in her wake, but they fit together somehow, their differences complementing rather than conflicting. Marcus's steady calmness balanced Georgia's nervous energy. Her warmth and chattiness drew him out of his silences. They worked side by side during the days and sat together on the porch in the evenings, talking about their plans and dreams and the future they were building together. 1 month after their arrival at Willow Creek, Marcus came back from Carson City with supplies and news. "There's talk in town about a man asking questions. Thomas Bartlett looking for his daughter, claiming she was kidnapped by a drifter." George's blood went cold. "He found us." "Not yet. I didn't give our real location. But people in Carson City know about this ranch now. It's only a matter of time before he puts it together." Marcus set down the supply sacks and turned to face her. "We need to decide how to handle this, Georgia. Do we run again, try to stay ahead of him? Or do we stand our ground?" Georgia thought about her mother, who had never found the courage to fight back, who had endured until endurance killed her. She thought about the deed in her name, the home she was building, the life she was creating from nothing. And she thought about Marcus, this good man who had given her everything without asking anything in return. "We stand our ground," she said firmly. "This is my land, my home. I won't let him take it from me." Marcus nodded, something like pride flickering in his eyes. "Then we'll face him together when the time comes." The time came sooner than expected. 3 days later, Georgia was in the garden pulling weeds when she heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching. She looked up to see her father riding toward the ranch on a borrowed horse, his face mottled with rage even from a distance. "Georgia," he bellowed. "Georgia, you get out here right now." Marcus emerged from the barn, moving to stand between Thomas Bartlett and the garden where Georgia remained frozen. "That's far enough," he called out. "You're not welcome here." Thomas dismounted, swaying slightly. Drunk, Georgia realized. He had been drinking for courage. "You got no right to keep my daughter from me. She belongs with her family." "She is with her family," Marcus said calmly. "She's with her husband, on land that belongs to her. You need to leave, Mr. Bartlett." "Husband," Thomas spat the word like a curse. "You think a piece of paper makes you her husband? You think you can just steal a man's daughter and call it legal?" Georgia found her voice, found her courage. She stood up from the garden and walked to stand beside Marcus. "He didn't steal me. I chose to leave. I chose to marry him. And I'm never coming back to Virginia City, never coming back to you." Thomas's face went purple. "You ungrateful little witch, after everything I've done for you, kept a roof over your head, food in your belly. This is how you repay me. You beat me," Georgia said, each word deliberate. "You terrorized me. You killed my mother with your cruelty, and you were going to kill me too eventually. Marcus saved my life by offering me a way out, and I took it. That's not theft, that's rescue. You're my daughter, my property. I'm a grown woman with a legal marriage certificate and a deed to this land in my name. In the eyes of the law, I'm free of you." Georgia stepped forward, shaking but determined. "Go home, father. Go back to Virginia City and forget you ever had a daughter, because I'm done being your victim." Thomas lunged forward, his hand raised to strike, but Marcus moved faster. He caught the older man's wrist in an iron grip and twisted, forcing him to his knees. "Touch her again, and it'll be the last thing you do," Marcus said, his voice deadly quiet. "I'm a patient man, but I have limits." "You've reached them." He released Thomas with a shove that sent him sprawling in the dust. Thomas scrambled to his feet, his eyes wild, looking between Georgia and Marcus like a trapped animal searching for escape. "This isn't over," he snarled. "I'll find a way to make you pay for this humiliation." "It is over," Georgia said. "It's been over since the day I left. You just didn't want to accept it." They watched him mount his horse and ride away, his back rigid with fury. Georgia waited until he was out of sight before her legs gave out. Marcus caught her, lowering her gently to the ground. "You did it," he murmured into her hair. "You stood up to him. You were so brave, Georgia." "I was terrified," she admitted. "Bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite the fear. And you did that beautifully." They sat there in the dust for a long time, holding each other while the adrenaline faded and reality settled back in. Georgia realized that she was crying again, but these tears felt different, cleaner somehow, like they were washing away the last remnants of her father's hold over her. That night, after a quiet dinner, Georgia found herself unable to sleep. She lay in her bedroom listening to the sounds of the house settling, of Marcus moving quietly in the main room. Finally, she got up and padded out to where he sat by the dying fire, staring into the coals. "Can't sleep either," he asked without turning. "Too much on my mind." Georgia sat down beside him, pulling her shawl tighter against the night chill. "Marcus, why did you really offer to marry me? The truth this time." He was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then he said, "When I walked into that bakery and saw you, saw the bruise on your face and the fear in your eyes, I saw myself. Not the circumstances, but the feeling. That trapped, desperate feeling of having no control over your own life. But you left home by choice. After my family died, yes. But before that, I was stuck. My father had plans for me, expectations. I was supposed to take over the farm, marry a girl from a neighboring property, live and die within 5 miles of where I was born. I loved my father, but I didn't want that life. When the cholera came, part of me was relieved, guilty as hell about it, but relieved." He finally looked at her, his eyes reflecting firelight. "When I saw you, I saw a chance to give someone else the freedom I'd found. To help someone escape their trap the way death accidentally helped me escape mine. That sounds terrible, doesn't it?" "No," Georgia said softly. "It sounds honest. I told myself it was practical, that I needed a wife anyway, might as well be one who needed me as much as I needed her. But the truth is, from the moment I looked at you, something shifted in my chest, like I'd been waiting for you without knowing it." He turned to face her fully. "I know it's too soon to say this. I know we barely know each other, but I'm falling in love with you, Georgia. Have been since that first day. And I needed you to know that, so you understand this isn't just charity or convenience. Not for me." Georgia's breath caught. She looked at this man who had given her everything, who asked for nothing, who worked himself to exhaustion to build them a life together. She thought about how safe she felt with him, how easy it had become to laugh in his presence, how her heart lifted when she saw him coming in from the fields each evening. "I'm falling in love with you too," she whispered. "I didn't know it was possible to feel this way about someone. Didn't know that love could be gentle and patient instead of violent and demanding. You've taught me that, Marcus. You've shown me what real love looks like." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his work-roughened hands. "Can I kiss you?" "Yes," Georgia breathed. "Please, yes." The kiss was sweet and careful, a question asked and answered. Marcus's lips were soft against hers, moving with a tenderness that brought fresh tears to her eyes. When they finally pulled apart, Georgia was smiling. "That was my first kiss," she admitted. Marcus's eyes widened. "Really? My father never let me anywhere near men, and I never wanted anyone to touch me anyway after seeing what his touch did to my mother." She traced her fingers along Marcus's jaw. "But I want you to touch me. I want everything with you. We have time," Marcus said. "All the time in the world. We don't have to rush anything." But Georgia was done waiting, done letting fear dictate her choices. She leaned in and kissed him again, deeper this time, pouring everything she felt into the press of her lips against his. Marcus made a sound low in his throat and pulled her closer, one hand tangling in her hair while the other splayed across her back. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marcus rested his forehead against hers. "Georgia, are you sure about this?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." He stood, offering his hand. "Then come with me." They made love slowly in the bedroom Georgia had been occupying alone, Marcus taking endless care to make sure she felt safe and cherished. He kissed every bruise, every scar, every place her father's violence had marked her, as if he could heal the damage with his tenderness. And when they finally came together, Georgia felt something fundamental shift inside her. This was what love was supposed to be. This sharing, this trust, this beautiful vulnerability. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, Marcus's fingers tracing idle patterns on her bare shoulder. "I love you," he murmured. "My beautiful, brave wife." "I love you," Georgia replied, the words still feeling new and precious on her tongue. "My gentle, wonderful husband." The seasons turned and Willow Creek Ranch flourished under their combined efforts. Marcus brought home 3 cows and a bull from a dispersal sale, the beginning of their herd. Georgia's garden exploded with vegetables, and her bread became legendary among their few neighbors. She started selling loaves in Carson City, her baking skills finally bringing an income that was hers to control. They worked hard and laughed often, building a life that felt increasingly solid. Marcus proved to be handy with carpentry, adding a proper bedroom to the house so they could expand the main room. Georgia learned to ride, conquering her fear of horses with Marcus's patient instruction. They became partners in the truest sense, each supporting the other's dreams and ambitions. But the shadow of Thomas Bartlett lingered. Reports filtered back from Virginia City that he had become increasingly unstable, drinking away the bakery's profits, driving away customers with his erratic behavior. Part of Georgia felt guilty for that, as if his decline was somehow her fault. Marcus always reminded her that her father had chosen his own path, just as she had chosen hers. Winter came hard to Nevada that year. Snow dusted the mountains around them, and frost turned the grassland silver each morning. Georgia and Marcus spent long evenings by the fire, Marcus reading aloud from books they had purchased in Carson City, while Georgia worked on a quilt, piecing together fabric scraps into something beautiful and functional. "I think I'm pregnant," Georgia said one night in February, the words tumbling out without preamble. Marcus looked up from his book, his expression frozen somewhere between shock and joy. "You think or you know, I'm 2 months late, and I've been sick every morning for the past week. And my breasts hurt." Georgia set down her sewing. "I'm pregnant, Marcus. We're going to have a baby." He set the book aside carefully, as if afraid sudden movement might shatter the moment. Then he crossed to where she sat and knelt before her, his hands covering hers. "A baby," he repeated, wonder coloring his voice. "We're going to be parents. Are you happy?" Georgia asked, suddenly uncertain. "Happy," Marcus laughed, the sound bright with emotion. "Georgia, I'm terrified and thrilled and so in love with you I can barely stand it. We're going to have a family. A real family." He pulled her into his arms and they held each other while the future expanded before them in new and miraculous ways. A baby. Their baby. Living proof that something beautiful could come from pain, that love could create life even in the harsh Nevada desert. The pregnancy was harder than Georgia expected. Morning sickness plagued her for months, leaving her exhausted and weak. Marcus took over more of the household duties, cooking simple meals and doing laundry while Georgia rested. He was endlessly patient, never complaining about the extra work, always ready with a cool cloth for her forehead or a gentle hand rubbing her back. As spring arrived and Georgia's belly swelled with new life, they received word that Thomas Bartlett had lost the bakery. Unable to maintain it alone, unwilling to hire help, he had let it fall into such disrepair that the bank had seized the property. He was living in a boarding house now, working odd jobs and drinking away his earnings. "I should feel something," Georgia said when Marcus told her the news, "but I just feel numb. Is that wrong?" "No," Marcus said gently. "He stopped being your father a long time ago. You don't owe him your grief or your pity." In August, when the heat made the house feel like an oven despite their best efforts, Georgia went into labor. It was long and difficult, made worse by the isolation of ranch life. The nearest doctor was in Carson City, too far away to reach in time. Marcus delivered their son with shaking hands and whispered prayers, catching the squalling infant as Georgia pushed and screamed and finally collapsed back against the sweat-soaked sheets. "A boy," Marcus breathed, tears streaming down his face as he wrapped their son in clean cloth. "Georgia, we have a son." Georgia reached for the baby with trembling arms, and when they placed the tiny, perfect creature against her chest, she felt her heart expand in ways she hadn't known were possible. This was her child, hers and Marcus's, a whole new person made from their love. "What should we name him?" Marcus asked, sitting on the edge of the bed and running one gentle finger down the baby's cheek. Georgia thought about her mother, about the woman who had tried to give her a better life but hadn't lived to see it happen. "William," she said, "after my grandfather." "William Hammond, Will for short." "William Hammond," Marcus repeated, testing the name. "It's perfect, he's perfect. You're perfect." He leaned in to kiss her forehead. "You were so brave, Georgia. I'm in awe of you." Little Will proved to be a healthy, hungry baby with his father's dark hair and his mother's blue eyes. He filled the house with noise and chaos, and a joy so profound, it sometimes brought Georgia to tears. She had never imagined herself as a mother, had been too focused on survival to dream that far ahead. But now, holding her son while he nursed, watching Marcus rock him to sleep with such tenderness, she couldn't imagine her life any other way. They fell into new rhythms, their days organized around Will's needs. Marcus still worked the ranch, but now he came in multiple times a day to hold his son, to marvel at every tiny change and development. Georgia baked with Will strapped to her chest in a sling, her hands working dough while she sang him the same songs her mother had sung to her. The ranch continued to grow. Their small herd multiplied, their garden produced abundantly, and Georgia's bread business expanded to include neighboring ranches and even a general store in Carson City that sold her goods on consignment. They were prospering in ways that felt almost miraculous. When Will was 6 months old, Marcus came home from Carson City with troubling news. "Your father's been arrested. Got into a fight at a saloon, nearly killed a man. He's going to prison, Georgia. 10 years, maybe more." Georgia sat down heavily, Will clutched to her chest. "I should visit him." "Why?" Marcus asked gently. "What would that accomplish?" "I don't know. Closure, maybe. I need to look him in the eye and tell him that I'm happy, that he didn't win, that despite everything he did to hurt me, I built a beautiful life anyway." They made the trip to Virginia City 2 weeks later, leaving Will with a neighboring rancher's wife. The jail was a small, grim building that smelled of unwashed bodies and despair. Thomas Bartlett sat in his cell looking decades older than his actual age, his hair gone gray, his face haggard and lined. "Georgia," he rasped when he saw her. "You came." "I came to say goodbye," Georgia said, her voice steady. "I came to tell you that I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I deserve to be free of the anger and pain you caused. I have a son now, Father, a beautiful baby boy, and he will never know you. He'll never know what it's like to fear his own parent. I'm breaking the cycle you and your father and probably his father before him created. It ends with me." Thomas's face crumpled. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry, Georgia. I never meant to hurt you. I just didn't know any other way." "I know," Georgia said, surprised to find she meant it. "But not knowing another way isn't an excuse. You could have chosen to be better. You just didn't. And now you have to live with the consequences of that choice." She turned to leave, then paused. "I hope you find some peace in here, Father. I truly do, but I won't be back. This is goodbye." They walked out of the jail into the bright Nevada sunshine, Marcus's arm solid around her shoulders. Georgia breathed deeply, feeling something release in her chest. The past was finally, truly behind her. "How do you feel?" Marcus asked. "Free," Georgia said simply. "For the first time in my life, completely free." The years unfolded in a tapestry of small joys and hard work. Will grew into a sturdy toddler, then a curious little boy who followed his father everywhere, imitating his walk and his mannerisms with adorable precision. Georgia gave birth to a daughter when Will was 3, a tiny thing with dark curls and her father's whiskey eyes. They named her Rose after Georgia's middle name. The ranch thrived. Marcus hired on help as they expanded their herd, young men looking for honest work who became like family. Georgia's baking operation grew until she had a dedicated kitchen built separate from the house, complete with multiple ovens and workspace for the assistant she hired from Carson City. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Marcus surprised Georgia with a trip to San Francisco. They left the children with trusted friends and spent a week exploring the city, attending theater performances and eating in fancy restaurants and walking hand in hand along the waterfront like young lovers. "You ever regret it?" Georgia asked one evening as they watched the sun set over the Pacific Ocean. "Taking a chance on a terrified girl in a bakery, tying yourself to someone you didn't know." Marcus pulled her close, his lips brushing her temple. "Not for a single second." "You're the best decision I ever made," Georgia Hammond. "The best thing that ever happened to me. Even better than Willow Creek Ranch. The ranch is just land. You're my home." He turned her to face him, his expression serious. "I want you to know something. I know I married you to protect you, and maybe in the beginning, that was the primary motivation. But somewhere along the way, protection turned to friendship, and friendship turned to love, and love turned into this all-consuming thing that defines my entire existence. I wake up every morning grateful that you chose to trust me, that you let me love you, that you love me back." Georgia kissed him there on the beach, pouring 5 years of love and gratitude and joy into the press of her lips against his. "You saved my life," she whispered against his mouth. "And then you showed me how to live it. I'll never stop being grateful for that." They returned to Willow Creek Ranch renewed and ready for whatever came next. The children greeted them with squeals of delight, while chattering about everything he had done while they were gone, Rose clinging to Georgia like she might disappear again. More years passed in a blur of seasons and celebrations. Will started school in Carson City, riding into town each day on his pony with other ranch children. Rose proved to have her mother's gift for baking, spending hours in the kitchen creating ever more elaborate breads and pastries. Marcus expanded the ranch to include sheep, diversifying their income streams. When Will turned 10, Georgia gave birth to twins, 2 boys they named James and Daniel. The house was chaos and noise and love overflowing. Marcus built additions to accommodate their growing family, joking that at this rate, they would need to build a hotel rather than a house. Georgia's father died in prison when Will was 12. She received a letter from the warden informing her of Thomas Bartlett's passing from pneumonia. She read it once, folded it carefully, and placed it in the tin that still held the deed to the ranch. Then she went outside to where Marcus was teaching the twins to rope fence posts and kissed her husband like he was the air she needed to breathe. "Everything all right?" he asked, concerned by the sudden display of affection. "Everything's perfect," Georgia said honestly. "I just needed to remind myself how lucky I am." Will grew into a young man who looked startlingly like his father, all height and broad shoulders and quiet competence. He had Marcus's steadiness but Georgia's warmth, a combination that made him popular with everyone he met. When he turned 18, he announced his intention to marry Sarah, the daughter of a neighboring rancher. Georgia stood in her bedroom on Will's wedding day, watching Marcus help their son adjust his tie, and marveled at how far they had all come. 23 years ago, she had been a terrified girl trapped in her father's bakery with no hope for the future. Now she was the matriarch of a thriving ranch, mother to 4 healthy children, wife to a man who still made her heart race when he smiled at her a certain way. "What are you thinking?" Marcus asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "I'm thinking that the scared girl who married a stranger 23 years ago could never have imagined all of this," Georgia said, leaning back against him. "I'm thinking that taking that leap of faith with you was the bravest thing I ever did." "We took the leap together," Marcus reminded her. "I was just as scared as you were, Georgia, just better at hiding it. The wedding was beautiful, held at Willow Creek Ranch with half of Carson City in attendance. Georgia watched her son marry the woman he loved and thought about how different his life would be from hers. Will knew nothing of violence or fear. He had grown up surrounded by love and support and the absolute certainty that he was wanted. That was her legacy, Georgia realized. Not the bread she baked or the ranch she helped build, but the cycle of pain she had broken. Her children would never know what it felt like to fear their own parents. Rose married 2 years after Will, choosing a banker from Carson City who adored her utterly. The twins showed no signs of settling down yet, too busy helping run the ranch and breaking hearts throughout the territory. The house felt emptier with the older children gone, but Marcus and Georgia adapted, rediscovering each other in the quiet spaces. On their 30th anniversary, Georgia woke to find Marcus already up, standing on the porch and watching the sunrise over their land. She joined him, slipping her hand into his. 30 years, she said softly. 3 decades since you walked into a bakery and changed my life forever. Best decision I ever made, Marcus said, the same words he had spoken in San Francisco all those years ago. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't come into the bakery that day? Georgia asked. If you had just ridden past. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then shook his head. No, because I don't think fate works that way. I think we were always meant to find each other. Maybe not that exact day in that exact way, but somehow, somewhere we would have crossed paths. Some things are just meant to be. Like us, Georgia said. Like us, Marcus agreed. They stood together watching the sun paint the sky in shades of gold and pink, the same sun that had risen on their wedding day 3 decades earlier. The ranch spread before them, a testament to everything they had built together. Fences in good repair, cattle grazing peacefully, the house that had grown from a single room to a sprawling structure that could accommodate their entire family when they all came home for holidays. I love you, Georgia said, the words as easy and natural as breathing after all these years. I love you too, Marcus replied, pulling her close. Every day more than the day before. That's my promise to you, Georgia. For however many days we have left, I'll love you more with each one. Georgia Rose Hammond, formerly Bartlett, stood in the circle of her husband's arms and felt the complete absence of fear. She was safe. She was loved. She was home. And that, she thought, was the greatest miracle of all. Not just that she had escaped her father's violence, but that she had found this gentle man who showed her what love was supposed to look like, who gave her children and a home and a future she never could have imagined during those dark years in the bakery. The years continued their steady march forward. Marcus's hair went gray at the temples, then completely silver. Georgia gained lines around her eyes from decades of smiling and squinting in the Nevada sun. Their bodies showed the wear of hard work and time, but their love remained as strong as ever, perhaps even stronger for having weathered life's storms together. Will gave them grandchildren, 3 boisterous boys who loved visiting the ranch and learning ranch skills from their grandfather. Rose had 2 daughters, sweet-tempered girls who inherited their grandmother's baking talent. The twins eventually married within a year of each other. Daniel to a schoolteacher from Carson City, and James to a widow with 2 children from her first marriage. Willow Creek Ranch became the center of a sprawling family empire, with various children and grandchildren working different aspects of the operation. Georgia's baking business had evolved into a commercial bakery in Carson City, run by Rose and her husband, that supplied goods throughout the territory. The ranch itself ran hundreds of head of cattle and sheep, employing dozens of workers. But through all the growth and change, the heart of Willow Creek remained the small log house where Georgia and Marcus had first built their life together. They never moved to the larger house Marcus built for Will and his family, preferring the intimate space where they had fallen in love, where their children had been born, where every corner held memories of the life they had created. On a warm spring evening when Georgia was 55 and Marcus 60, they sat on their porch watching their grandchildren play in the yard. Marcus held Georgia's hand, his thumb tracing familiar patterns on her palm. "You remember that first night here?" he asked. "When we rode up and saw the ranch for the first time, I remember thinking it was the most beautiful place I had ever seen," Georgia said. "Even run down and neglected, it represented freedom, a fresh start." "It represented hope," Marcus added. "A hope that two broken people could build something whole together." "We weren't broken," Georgia corrected gently. "We were wounded. There's a difference. Broken things can't be fixed. Wounded things can heal." Marcus smiled at her, that slow, soft smile that still made her heart flutter after 3 decades. "When did you get so wise?" "I learned from the best," Georgia said, squeezing his hand. As the sun set and their grandchildren were called home by their parents, Georgia and Marcus remained on the porch, comfortable in the silence that long marriage brings. They had built something remarkable here, not just a ranch or a business, but a legacy of love that would outlast them both. Their children and grandchildren would carry forward the lessons they had learned, that love is gentle, that family is what you make it, that courage sometimes means accepting help from a stranger. "I would do it all again," Georgia said suddenly. "Every hard moment, every scary decision, every leap of faith. I would do it all again to end up right here, right now with you." "So would I," Marcus said, "1,000 times over." They sat together in the gathering darkness, two people who had found each other against impossible odds and built a life that exceeded their wildest dreams. The cowboy who offered his name and protection, and the baker's daughter who was brave enough to accept it. Together, they had created something beautiful from the ashes of Georgia's painful past: a family, a home, a love story that would be told and retold by generations to come. Inside the house, Georgia's sourdough starter sat in its crock on the counter, the same starter her mother had cultivated decades ago in Virginia City. Tomorrow morning, Georgia would use it to bake bread, just as she had done almost every day for the past 30 years. And the house would fill with that warm, yeasty smell that Marcus said was better than any perfume. The smell of home. The smell of love made visible, because in the end, that's what this was. Not just a story of escape or rescue, but a story of two people choosing each other every single day. Choosing to build together, to love together, to face whatever life brought together. Marcus had offered Georgia his name and protection that day in the bakery, but what he had really given her was the chance to discover who she could be without fear. And what Georgia had given Marcus in return was a home, a family, a purpose beyond simple survival. As the stars emerged in the vast Nevada sky, Georgia Rose Hammond rested her head on her husband's shoulder and felt the deep contentment of a life well lived. She had escaped the trap of her father's violence, yes, but more importantly, she had run toward something, toward love, toward hope, toward the possibility of happiness. And in Marcus James Hammond, she had found all three and more besides. Their story could have ended a dozen different ways. Marcus could have ridden past that bakery without stopping. Georgia could have been too afraid to accept his offer. Thomas Bartlett could have caught them before they reached safety, but none of those things happened. Instead, two wounded souls found each other at exactly the right moment and chose to take a chance on love. And that chance had given them everything: a ranch, a family, 3 decades of love and laughter and shared dreams. It had given them children who knew only kindness, grandchildren who would grow up understanding that love was supposed to be gentle. It had broken the cycle of violence that might have continued for generations and replaced it with a legacy of compassion and care. As they finally rose to go inside for the night, Marcus pulled Georgia close one more time. "Thank you," he whispered into her hair. For what? Georgia asked. For trusting me, for loving me, for building this life with me, for being brave enough to take that leap. Georgia smiled against his chest, breathing in the familiar scent of him, leather and sage and the soap she made herself. Thank you for being worth leaping for. They walked into their house hand in hand, closing the door on another day at Willow Creek Ranch. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new joys, as every day did. But whatever came, they would face it together, as they had faced everything for the past 30 years. The baker's daughter and the cowboy, bound by vows spoken in desperation but kept in love. Not a perfect story, perhaps, but a true one. And in the end, that was worth more than any fairy tale. The house settled around them in comfortable creaks and sighs as they prepared for bed, moving through familiar routines with the ease of long practice. Georgia brushed out her hair while Marcus banked the fire. Marcus checked the locks while Georgia laid out their clothes for the next day. Small acts of care and consideration, performed so often they required no thought, yet each one an expression of the love that sustained them. As they climbed into bed, their bodies finding their customary positions with automatic precision, Georgia thought about the girl she had been and the woman she had become. That frightened 22-year-old with a bruised face and a broken spirit would hardly recognize the confident matriarch she had grown into. But the thread that connected them was hope, the stubborn refusal to give up, the willingness to take one more step forward even when the path ahead was unclear. Marcus, she whispered into the darkness, I'm happy. I just wanted you to know that. After everything, after all these years, I'm genuinely, completely happy. She felt rather than saw his smile. Me too, love, me too. And as sleep claimed them both, their hands remained clasped between them, a connection maintained even in unconsciousness. Outside, the Nevada night wrapped around Willow Creek Ranch like a blessing, stars wheeling overhead in their eternal dance, the creek murmuring its endless song. The cattle settled in the fields, the horses dozed in the barn, and in the little log house at the heart of it all, two people who had saved each other slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that they were exactly where they belonged. This was how love was supposed to work, Georgia thought, in that drowsy space between waking and sleeping. Not demands and violence and control, but partnership and respect and choosing each other over and over again. Marcus had taught her that, had shown her through years of patient devotion what a relationship could be when both parties came to it with open hearts and good intentions. And she had taught him things too, she knew. Had shown him that he was worthy of being loved for exactly who he was, not for what he could provide or accomplish. Had given him the family he craved, the home he had been seeking, the sense of belonging that had eluded him since his parents' deaths. They had healed each other, these two wounded souls, through the simple act of showing up day after day and choosing love over fear. Morning would come, as it always did. Georgia would rise and build up the fire and start the coffee and begin mixing dough for the day's baking. Marcus would tend the animals and check fences and do the 100 small tasks that kept a ranch running. Their grandchildren might visit, or one of their children might stop by with news or questions, or simply a desire to sit at their parents' table and remember that they were loved. But for now, in this moment, there was only peace, only the quiet satisfaction of a day well spent and the promise of more days to come. Only the warmth of Marcus beside her and the roof over their heads and the land beneath their feet that they had built into something meaningful. The baker's daughter had needed escape from her father, and the cowboy had offered his name and protection. But what they had created together went far beyond that simple transaction. They had built a love story worthy of the telling, a legacy that would outlast them both, a proof that even in the harsh landscape of the Wild West, Gentleness and kindness could not only survive but thrive. And as the night deepened around Willow Creek Ranch, as Marcus and Georgia Hammond slept peacefully in each other's arms, the future spread before them bright with possibility. Because they had learned the most important lesson of all, that love, real love, the kind that lasts, isn't about grand gestures or dramatic rescues. It's about the daily choice to be kind, to be patient, to be present. It's about building something together, brick by brick, day by day, year by year. It's about two people deciding that together they are stronger than anything life can throw at them. And that, in the end, is the only story worth telling.